They bought him for 3 credits. A frail, terrified human orphan meant to die in the uranium mines of the Kralien Empire. They thought humanity was weak, but they didn't know this boy was bred for a secret war. And they just handed a combat prodigy a weapon. The air on Xylos Prime tasted like battery acid and crushed iron. It was a miserable, irradiated rock on the fringes of the Kralien Empire, a place where the unwanted dregs of a dozen conquered species were sent to die digging for hyperisotopes. Among the hunched, coughing masses of slaves working the primary slag heaps was a human boy named Jasper Thorne. To the 4-eyed, chitin-plated Kralien overseers, Jasper was nothing more than a serial number. Unit 734. He was 17, though he looked smaller. His frame constantly stooped, a pronounced limp dragging his left leg, his eyes permanently fixed on the toxic dirt. He was a survivor of New Galveston, a human agricultural colony that had been glassed from orbit 5 years prior. The Kraliens considered humans a fragile Tier 4 species, weak in constitution, lacking natural armor, and easily broken. But Jasper was a lie. Every shallow breath he took, every stumble, every pathetic cringe when an overseer cracked an electro-whip was a meticulously calculated performance. Before New Galveston fell, Jasper hadn't just been a farmer's son. When the sky turned to fire, he had been pulled from the rubble by Staff Sergeant David Miller, a retired Earth Coalition Special Operations veteran who had retreated to the colony for a quiet life. For 3 years, hidden deep in the irradiated cavern systems where the alien sensors couldn't penetrate, Miller didn't just keep Jasper alive. He forged him. The universe doesn't care that you're a child, Artie. Miller had told him, wrapping the boy's bleeding knuckles in coarse bandages after a grueling sparring session. The Kraliens rely on their armor and their plasma rifles. They are slow. Their nervous systems take a fraction of a second longer to process pain. As a human, you evolved on a death world. Your gravity is twice theirs. Your bone density is a weapon. Your adrenaline is a biological hyperdrive. Miller had recognized something terrifying in Jasper, a kinetic genius. The boy was a true combat prodigy. He didn't just learn martial arts. He absorbed the physics of violence. He could watch a dropship land and instantly calculate its blind spots. He could memorize the exact patrol routes of the Kralien drones after a single rotation. When Miller was finally discovered and executed by a Kralien patrol, Jasper hadn't screamed. He hadn't fought back. He had simply dropped to his knees and played the broken, weeping orphan, allowing himself to be collared and sold. He knew he couldn't take down an entire garrison with his bare hands. Not yet. He needed to wait. He needed to get off the rimworld. On the slag heaps, Jasper spent his days lifting crushing loads of ore. The Kraliens didn't realize that Earth's gravity made the heavy rocks feel like pumice to him. He used the grueling labor for resistance training, subtly maintaining his explosive muscle twitch beneath a layer of grime and loose, ragged clothing. His routine was interrupted during the middle of the 3rd solar cycle. A transport ship, sleek and terrifyingly silent, descended into the mining quarry. It bore the crimson crest of the Kralien High Command. The overseers panicked, cracking their whips to line the slaves up. Jasper shuffled into line, keeping his head down. Beside him, a younger human boy named Leo Jenkins was shaking uncontrollably. Leo was only 12, sick with radiation poisoning, and practically dead on his feet. "Don't look at them," Jasper whispered, his voice a barely audible rasp. "Keep your eyes on the dirt, Leo." A Kralien aristocrat stepped off the ship. He wore ceremonial armor, polished to a mirror shine, accompanied by heavily armed shock troopers. This was Praetor Vile, a recruiter for the Blood Tithe, the Emperor's orbital gladiatorial games. The games were a brutal meat grinder meant to entertain the core worlds, and Vile was here for cheap fodder. Vile walked down the line of shivering slaves holding a biometric scanner. He was looking for the largest, most aggressive aliens, Krogan brutes, Saurian mercenaries, who had been captured. He completely ignored the humans. As Vile passed, a Kralien guard shoved Leo to make room. The sick boy stumbled and fell, crashing into the praetor's polished boots. The courtyard went dead silent. Vile looked down in disgust. "Parasite," the alien hissed, drawing a plasma pistol. Jasper's heart rate didn't spike. His breathing didn't change. Time simply slowed down. He mapped the trajectory of the praetor's arm, the distance to the guard, the friction of the dirt beneath his bare feet. In a fraction of a second, Jasper lunged forward, throwing his hands up in a pathetic plea, intentionally tripping over his own feet. He crashed into the guard, an accident that caused the guard's rifle to strike Vile's arm. The plasma shot went wide, vaporizing a boulder instead of Leo's head. Jasper tumbled into the dirt, whimpering and cowering. Vile was furious. He kicked Jasper in the ribs hard. The alien expected ribs to shatter, to hear the human scream in agony. But when his heavy boot connected with Jasper's side, Vile frowned. It felt like kicking a solid bulkhead of carbon steel. Jasper, utilizing Miller's breathing techniques, had tensed his core so perfectly that the kinetic energy was absorbed and dispersed instantly. He forced out a fake cry of pain, rolling over. Suspicious, Vile pointed his biometric scanner directly at the cowering human boy. The machine chimed, its holographic display flashing red. Vile's 4 eyes widened. The scanner read Jasper's vitals. Bone density 400% higher than the Kralien average. Muscle fiber density anomalous. Resting heart rate completely steady despite the supposed panic. Vile looked at the boy who was still pretending to hyperventilate. The alien smiled, a cruel mandible clicking sound. Fascinating. An anomaly. The core world crowds love a freak. Vile pointed a claw at Jasper. "Take this one. Put him in the heavy containment cells. He's going to the proving grounds." Jasper was dragged away, his head still bowed. But beneath the dirt and matted hair, a cold, calculating fire ignited in his eyes. He was finally getting off this rock. The journey to the Kralien capital, Ethelgard, took 3 weeks. Jasper was thrown into the bowels of the transport ship, shackled to a bulkhead in complete darkness. The Kraliens hadn't fed him in 5 days, a standard tactic to weaken the gladiators so they wouldn't rebel upon arrival. But Jasper was human. His Clear's throat body went into ketosis, tapping into perfectly preserved fat and muscle stores. Instead of weakening, his senses sharpened. He spent the 3 weeks counting the micro-vibrations of the ship's hyperdrive, mapping the deck layouts through sound alone, and subtly twisting his wrists against the titanium, cuffs to build calluses and test the tensile limits of the locking mechanisms. When the ship finally docked, The holding pens of the Ethelgard arena were a sensory nightmare. The stench of copper blood, ozone, and the fear pheromones of 100 different species hung heavy in the air. Jasper was shoved into a large staging cell alongside 30 other slaves. Most of them were massive hulking aliens, gladiators who had fought before, mercenaries with cybernetic implants, and feral beasts pulled from jungle worlds. In the corner of the cell sat another human. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, with a jagged scar across his throat and the faded tattoo of the Earth Coalition Navy on his shoulder. He watched Jasper get thrown into the room with a look of profound pity. "First time I've seen a kid in here," the man said, his voice raspy. He offered a canteen of murky water. "Name's Connor Wright, ECN, Engineering Corps. What's your name, son?" "Jasper," he replied softly, taking a small sip to wet his cracked lips, being careful not to gorge and cramp his stomach. "Listen to me, Jasper," Connor said, leaning in. "When those gates open, it's not a fight. It's an execution. They're going to send in the Scarviks, armored hounds, fast and brutal. They just want us to run so the crowd gets a show. Don't run. Let them take you quick. It's better than getting dragged out and eaten alive." Jasper looked at the massive steel gates at the end of the holding pen. He didn't look scared. He looked analytical. "What is the floor made of?" Jasper asked. Connor blinked, confused. "What?" "Sand, mostly." "Over a grated plasma grid? Why?" "Friction," Jasper murmured, almost to himself. "Good." Before Connor could ask what the boy meant, a deafening klaxon blared. The ground shook as the massive steel gates ground open, revealing the blinding harsh light of the arena suns. A roar from 100,000 Kralien spectators cascaded down like a physical weight. The guards activated their stun pipes, driving the 30 slaves out onto the bloody sand of the arena floor. The space was massive, nearly a kilometer wide, surrounded by towering energy shields. High above, in the gilded VIP boxes, Praetor Vale and the Kralien nobility watched with cruel anticipation. Jasper stepped onto the sand. The stooped posture he had maintained for 5 years vanished. He stood up straight. His spine popped in a series of sharp cracks, his shoulders broadening as he finally let his musculature relax into its natural predatory state. He rolled his neck. Across the arena, heavy iron portcullises lifted. The crowd roared in a frenzy as 12 Scarviks charged out. They were nightmares of bioengineered the size of rhinos, covered in jagged bone plates, moving with terrifying speed, their jaws dripping with neurotoxic saliva. Behind them marched a squad of elite Kralien initiates, heavily armored warriors wielding dual-bladed plasma glaives. Panic erupted among the slaves. The massive alien mercenaries broke formation, scattering in terror. Connor grabbed Jasper's shoulder. "Kid, stay behind me. I'll try to buy you." "Stand down, Connor," Jasper said. The voice wasn't the trembling whisper of an orphan anymore. It was cold, flat, and absolute. A Scarvik beast singled them out. It lowered its armored head, moving at nearly 80 kilometers an hour, tearing across the sand like a freight train of teeth and bone. Connor braced himself for death, closing his eyes. Jasper didn't run. He stepped forward. Distance 20 meters. Speed 80 kilometers per hour. Weak point, the unarmored joint behind the primary mandible. Jasper's mind processed the variables instantly. At the very last microsecond, as the beast snapped its jaws to bite Jasper in half, the boy moved. He didn't dodge wildly. He pivoted precisely on the ball of his foot, stepping merely inches out of the beast's direct path. The massive creature flew past him, its momentum impossible to arrest. As it passed, Jasper struck. He channeled the kinetic energy from his earth gravity musculature, snapping his elbow up in a devastating, blindingly fast strike. The point of his elbow connected squarely with the soft tissue behind the beast's armored jaw. The crack echoed across the silent arena. The strike severed the beast's brain stem instantly. The massive creature's legs gave out, and its 80 kilometers per hour momentum sent it violently tumbling head over heels into the dirt, kicking up a massive cloud of sand before crashing to a halt at Connor's feet, dead. The entire arena, 100,000 screaming aliens, went dead silent. Even the Kralien initiates stopped their march. Connor Wright's jaw dropped. He stared at the dead monstrosity, then up at the 17-year-old boy. Jasper didn't pause to celebrate. He didn't even look at the dead beast. He immediately broke into a sprint directly toward the squad of Kralien elite initiates. "He's insane," one of the alien slaves muttered. The Kralien initiates, recovering from their shock, raised their plasma glaives. The lead warrior swung a brutal sweeping strike aimed to decapitate the human. Jasper slid under the blazing plasma blade, the heat singeing his hair. He used his forward momentum to drive a crippling palm strike into the Kralien's knee joint. The alien chitin shattered like glass under the force of Jasper's blow. As the Kralien screamed and fell forward, Jasper fluidly reached up, caught the handle of the falling plasma glaive, and ripped it from the alien's grip. In a single continuous motion, Jasper spun the glaive, severing the fallen Kralien's head, and vaulted off the corpse to launch himself into the center of the remaining squad. What followed was not a fight. It was a surgical dismantling. Jasper moved with a terrifying liquid grace. He didn't fight like a brawler. He fought like a machine executing a flawless program. He exploited the Kralien's slower reaction times, slipping through the microscopic gaps in their guard. He used the reach of the glaive to sever tendons, pierce armored joints, and blind his opponents. Every movement was mathematically perfect. No wasted energy, no hesitation. When two initiates tried to flank him, Jasper used the body of a third as a meat shield, letting them impale their own comrade before he vaulted over the corpse and drove the blunt end of his weapon through their helmets. In less than 45 seconds, the elite Kralien squad lay dead in the sand, their blue blood staining the arena floor. The remaining scavenged beasts, sensing an apex predator, actually backed away whimpering. Jasper stood alone in the center of the carnage. He spun the plasma glaive to flick the blood off the glowing blade, then planted the weapon into the sand. He didn't look at the cheering crowd. He slowly raised his head, his eyes locking directly onto the VIP box high above. He stared straight at Praetor Vile. Up in the box, Vile's hands were trembling. He had brought an orphan to the slaughter. Instead, he had unleashed a god of war into the heart of his empire. Jasper raised a single blood-soaked hand, pointing his finger directly at the Praetor. The message was clear. "You're next." For 6 months, the Ethelgerd arena ran red with alien blood, and all of it was spilled by a ghost. Jasper Thorne did not just survive the proving grounds, he conquered them. The Kralien Empire, a society built on the veneration of absolute power and martial supremacy, became intoxicated by the human anomaly. Millions tuned in across the subjugated systems to watch the frail, pale creature dismantle elite gladiators, cybernetic war beasts, and fully armored execution squads without ever suffering a scratch. They called him the Golkos, the Pale Reaper. But Preacher Vile, who had initially championed his discovery, was not celebrating. He was terrified. Jasper never looked at the cheering crowds. After every kill, he simply stared up at Vile's VIP box, an unblinking predator promising inevitable death. Despite his elevated status as a grand champion, Jasper refused the luxury quarters offered to victors. He insisted on remaining in the subterranean maximum security pens with the other human prisoners, including Connor Wright. The Kraliens allowed it, amused by the humans' pack mentality, completely unaware of the fatal error they were making. Deep in the damp darkness of Cell Block 4, Connor watched Jasper dismantle a stolen Kralien communication relay with nothing but a sharpened piece of bone and a coil of copper wire. "You're going to get us all executed, kid," Connor whispered, glancing nervously at the security cameras, which Jasper had discreetly blinded using a microscopic smudge of acidic scavenge blood. "The execution was already scheduled, Connor," Jasper replied, his hands moving with robotic precision. "Tomorrow is the Emperor's Ascension Gala. They plan to purge the lower cell blocks to make room for a new shipment of Saurian slaves. We have 14 hours. Connor slumped against the rusted bulkhead. "Even if you shored out the cell doors, there are 3,000 heavily armed shock troopers between us and the surface. You're good, Jasper, but you can't fight an army." Jasper paused. He looked at Connor, his eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. "I was never meant to fight them alone. I am not an orphan, Connor. And I wasn't just a farmer." Connor frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Miller found you in the rubble of New Galveston." "Miller was my handler," Jasper corrected, his voice dropping an octave, losing any trace of teenage vulnerability. "The New Galveston attack was a tragedy, but Earth High Command saw an opportunity. The Kraliens scan for energy signatures, weapons, and adult military personnel. They ignore children. They ignore the weak." Jasper tapped a sequence into the jury-rigged communicator. A faint blue holographic projection flickered to life, displaying a highly classified Earth Coalition insignia. "My genetic sequence," Jasper explained coldly, "is the culmination of a century of classified research. My muscle fibers and nervous system are derived from experimental biowarfare data pioneered by DARPA's Project Talos, combined with synthetic neural mesh woven by Boston Dynamics' deep black military division back in the 21st century. I wasn't born. I was engineered at Fort Liberty. I am an infiltration unit, a living, breathing Trojan horse." Connor stared at the boy in absolute horror and awe. You let them capture you. You endured the uranium mines just to get inside the Capitol? To get inside the shield grid, Jasper confirmed. He pulled up a tactical display on the hollow projection. The Kralien capital is protected by a planetary deflector shield. Earth Coalition dreadnoughts cannot bomb it from orbit. but the shield generator is powered by the same geothermal tap that runs this arena. Jasper quickly organized his intelligence, bringing up a comparative chart to show Connor exactly how they were going to survive the impossible odds. They rely entirely on their armor and their plasma weaponry, Jasper pointed out, tapping the holographic table. Take away the power grid, and their armor becomes heavy, useless lead. Their weapons won't fire. They become slow, blind targets. And how exactly do we take down the planetary power grid from a prison cell? Connor asked, the spark of rebellion finally igniting in his chest. Jasper held up a small cylindrical device. It was a makeshift EMP detonator, built entirely from scrapped gladiator weapons and arena tech. Tomorrow, during the grand finale, I will be fighting in the center of the arena, directly above the primary plasma conduit, Jasper said. Here is the operational timeline. Phase 1, the distraction. I will engage the Emperor's Royal Guard in the arena. I will draw the attention of every automated defense turret. Phase 2, the blackout. I will drive this EMP spike directly into the plasma conduit. The feedback loop will trigger a catastrophic failure in the primary geothermal tap. The arena, the prison, and the planetary shield will go completely dark. Phase 3, the uprising. Your cell doors will open. You and the other human posts will use the darkness to neutralize the guards. Take their kinetic weapons. Jasper looked dead into Connor's eyes. When the sky goes dark, Connor, I need you to lead the men to the surface. And what will you be doing? Connor asked. Jasper turned off the holo projection. I have an appointment with Praetor Vile, the Emperor's Ascension. Gala was the most magnificent spectacle in Kralien history. 300,000 spectators packed the towering brutalist architecture of the Ethel Guard Arena. The Emperor himself, a towering monstrosity draped in spun gold and crimson silks, sat upon a floating repulsor throne. Beside him sat Praetor Vile, sweating profusely beneath his ceremonial armor. Vile had tried to cancel Jasper's bout. He had begged the High Council to simply execute the human in his cell. But the Emperor had demanded a show. He wanted to see the ghost of Earth broken. The massive iron gates ground open, and Jasper stepped out onto the burning sand. He wore no armor, only a pair of canvas trousers and tattered cloth wrapped around his forearms. He held a simple heavy titanium staff, a kinetic weapon entirely devoid of plasma tech. The crowd's roar was deafening, a physical wall of sound. From the opposite side of the arena, the heavy portcullises rose, and the Emperor's Royal Guard marched out. There were 50 of them, 7 FT tall behemoths wearing heavily shielded power, wielding heavy repeating plasma cannons. It was an execution squad. Jasper didn't assume a fighting stance. He simply walked to the dead center of the arena floor, stopping precisely on the massive circular metal grate that covered the geothermal plasma conduit. Kill the parasite. Praetor Vale screamed from the VIP box, his voice amplified across the stadium. The 50 guards raised their cannons. The glowing blue coils hummed, charging a volley that would turn a city block into molten slag. Jasper looked down at the grate beneath his feet. He pulled the makeshift EMP detonator from his waistband. It was time. With blinding speed, Jasper drove the titanium staff down, smashing the lock on the grate. He kicked the heavy iron cover aside exposing the blinding, roaring river of blue plasma, surging just beneath the arena floor. Without a second of hesitation, he threw the EMP spike directly into the raging current. Distance to blast 0 meters. Impact in 0.3 seconds. Brace. Jasper threw himself flat against the sand, wrapping his arms around his head and exhaling completely to prevent his lungs from bursting. The plasma cannons fired, but the bolts never reached him. The EMP detonated. It was not an explosion of fire, but a catastrophic, silent shock wave of electromagnetic force. A massive dome of blinding white light erupted from the center of the arena, expanding outward at the speed of sound. Instantly, the 50 plasma bolts dissipated into harmless sparks. The royal guards froze in place. The servos in their heavy power armor instantly short-circuiting, locking them inside 2-ton iron coffins. The floating repulsor throne of the Emperor sparked violently and plummeted 50 feet, crashing into the spectator stands with a sickening crunch. The stadium lights blew out in a shower of glass. The automated turrets died, and high above the city, the shimmering, impenetrable dome of the planetary deflector shield flickered, fractured, and vanished into thin air. Complete chaos erupted. 300,000 Kraliens screamed in panic, trampling each other in the sudden, terrifying darkness. Down in the cell blocks, the electronic locks disengaged with a heavy clunk. Connor Wright kicked his cell door open, roaring at the top of his lungs. "Move, move! Take their weapons. For Earth!" Hundreds of human prisoners flooded the corridors, swarming the blind, unarmored Kralien guards. Back in the arena, Jasper rose from the sand. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt wiring. He picked up his titanium staff. He didn't look at the trapped royal guards. His eyes were locked on the VIP box, which had partially collapsed when the repulsor field failed. Jasper sprinted. He didn't run like a man. He ran like a hunting cat, scaling the sheer 50 ft concrete wall of the arena by driving his fingers into the microscopic cracks in the masonry. His enhanced muscles propelled him upward with terrifying, impossible leaps. He vaulted over the marble railing of the VIP box, landing silently. Praetor Vale was crawling through the wreckage, his ceremonial armor sparking and useless, his 4 eyes wide with unadulterated terror. He looked back and saw the human standing over him, the boy who had cowered in the uranium dirt of Xylos Prime. "Wait," Vile gasped, holding up a trembling clawed hand. I offer a ransom. The Empire will pay your weight in hyperisotopes. You are just a slave." Jasper stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply delivered the cold, mathematical truth. "I am a weapon," Jasper said quietly, "and you pointed me at your own head." Jasper swung the heavy titanium staff. The blow shattered Veal's chitinous helmet and the skull beneath it, ending the praetor instantly. Jasper dropped the staff. He walked to the edge of the ruined VIP box and looked up at the sky. The planetary shield was gone. The Kralien capital lay naked and exposed. Suddenly the clouds parted. The Skartoi, previously a pale alien violet, was torn open by a dozen blinding flashes of light. The sonic booms arrived a second later, shattering the remaining glass in the city. Dropping out of slip space right into the upper atmosphere, was the Earth Coalition Navy, massive wedge-shaped dreadnoughts, painted in stealth black and bearing the blue crest of humanity, blotted out the sun. Drop pods began raining down upon the capital like a metallic meteor shower, while heavy orbital cannons locked on to the Kralien military installations. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to eradicate. In the arena below, Connor Wright burst from the tunnel entrances, leading a heavily armed legion of human prisoners securing the perimeter as the first ECN drop ships touched down in the sand. A heavy transport landed near the VIP box. The ramp lowered, and General Thomas Hackett, a grizzled veteran of the First Contact Wars, strode out flanked by heavily armed Marines. He looked up at the VIP box and offered a crisp salute. Jasper, covered in dust, blood, and the ashes of an empire, returned the salute. The Kraliens had thought it was a Tier 4 species. They thought they were fragile. They didn't understand that Earth didn't just produce farmers and orphans. Earth produced apex predators, and the universe was about to learn why you never, ever invite a human inside your walls. What an absolutely explosive finale. The Kralien Empire thought they were buying a fragile slave, but they accidentally imported the ultimate weapon of human engineering right into their capital. Humanity proved once again that when backed into a corner, we don't just survive, we conquer. If Jasper's epic takedown of the alien empire got your adrenaline pumping, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more HFY sci-fi stories. See you next time.